I'm announcing today that a new Conservative government will bring change by introducing the Accountability Act 2.0.
Now, Mark Carney doesn't want to talk about any of that. That's why as soon as the media started asking him tough questions about it, he suspended his campaign and rushed back to Ottawa. He's been hiding from the public for 3 straight days now. He's hiding from scrutiny over the fact that he's already the most conflicted and compromised Prime Minister in Canadian history.
We'll increase the fines for ethics violations to $10,000. No more slaps on the wrist.
Tarnished Canadians' confidence in our democratic institutions, like the $60 million Arrive scam, the $1 billion Green Slush Fund, the Canada Student Service Grant, where they tried to give $1 billion to Liberal insiders at the We organization. And now, as Prime Minister, the current conflict of interest rules don't even require him to sell his assets in Brookfield. Now, he's gotten away with just moving his assets into a so-called blind trust. But the only people who are left blind are Canadian voters. We can't see what assets are in the trust, but Mark Carney knows because he put them there. Now, Mark Carney doesn't want to talk about any of that. That's why as soon as the media started asking him tough questions about it, he suspended his campaign and rushed back to Ottawa. He's been hiding from the public for 3 straight days now. He's hiding from scrutiny over the fact that he's already the most conflicted and compromised Prime Minister in Canadian history. From revelations about his cozy relationship with the Chinese government, cash stashed in offshore tax havens, and his history of lobbying governments he's supposed to be advising to benefit his employers and his own financial interests. This is the Prime Minister who leads a Liberal Party that's made up of ministers and caucus members who are responsible for the series of ethical scandals that have tarnished Canadians' confidence in our democratic institutions, like the $60 million Arrive scam, the $1 billion Green Slush Fund, the Canada Student Service Grant, where they tried to give $1 billion to Liberal insiders at the We organization. Mark Carney doesn't want you to think about any of that. That 87% of the cabinet that he appointed were the same cabinet ministers that advised Justin Trudeau. He's running on one election promise only, that he can deal with Trump. So how's that going? 2 weeks ago, he said that he made progress with Trump. Last week, he said that, quote, he can handle Trump, end quote. That's an actual quote from him. But there's no evidence whatsoever that Mark Carney can control or influence anything that Donald Trump does. The fact is that while the rest of the world is getting pauses on Trump's tariffs, there are more tariffs on Canada today than when Mark Carney became Prime Minister. Now, that's Mark Carney's actual record of dealing with Trump. He can't hide from that record any more than he can hide from his own conflicts and Liberal record of broken promises.
What a great corruption-busting champion we have in Eastern Ontario with Michael Barrett. Thank you for all your hard work holding this government to account and tirelessly pointing out and exposing Liberal waste and corruption and Mark Carney's unprecedented conflicts of interest. But the reason that it's important not to have government corruption, conflicts of interest, and rampant waste is because the people always pay the price. When politicians get rich by making everyone else poor, waitresses and welders, truck drivers and barbers end up paying the price and worse off. That's probably why Mark Carney's in hiding. Mark Carney is hiding again today in the middle of the election campaign he called so that you can forget that the lost Liberal decade drove the cost of housing and food up and drove your wages and living standards down. That crime and chaos are overtaking our once safe streets. He wants you to forget that Liberal insiders like him have profited richly off of the misery of everyone else. But let's just chronicle the corruption that we have witnessed in the last 10 years of the Liberals. Prime Minister Trudeau was found twice guilty of violating the Ethics Act, taking illegal vacations and interfering in corporate prosecutions. We know that the Green Slush Fund saw $1 billion largely handed out to government insiders, where the board members who handed out the money were also invested in the companies that got the money. Then there was the Arrive scam, a useless app no one needed that cost hundreds of times more than necessary and in the end didn't work, and no one was held accountable. The amount of money now spent on government contractors has gone up by well over 100% in a decade to over $20 billion. Roughly $1,400 per family is spent in federal taxes to fund consultants. Now, if you think for a second that this Liberal corruption is going to change with a fourth Liberal term headed by Mark Carney, sadly, you'd be exactly wrong. In fact, Mark Carney brings even more conflicts of interest. He's invested in a company that has money stashed away, billions of dollars stashed in overseas tax havens. He has a company that is in debt to the Chinese government-backed bank to the tune of $250 million. His company profited by his personal interventions to get handouts for investments they made in jet fuel and heat pumps. Now, his big solution to the Liberal housing crisis is that he wants the government to build prefabricated tiny homes. Well, his company is invested in prefabricated tiny homes. Clearly, this is not about helping young people own their own home. It's about filling the pockets of his investors and himself. I'm announcing today that a new Conservative government will bring change by introducing the Accountability Act 2.0, designed to remove the loopholes that Mr. Carney and the Liberals are using to avoid accountability for themselves and for their party. We're going to put Canadians first for a change. We're going to have an accountable government for a change. We're going to have politicians and leaders who work for you, for your affordable home and food, for your safe street, for your paycheck, for a change. Ministers should not be involved in setting policies that enrich themselves or their families without accountability. We should not allow people to use their political power in government to make decisions that will advantage themselves above and beyond the public interest. Let me explain the problem. There's a section in the Ethics Act right now that allows a politician to make a decision that benefits him or his family if it benefits other people as well. Now, the reason that was set up was so that, for example, Jim Flaherty benefited by cutting the GST because his consumer purchases were a little more affordable. But, of course, everybody benefited. We didn't want to declare that to be a conflict of interest. But it's been widely over-interpreted to allow, for example, Bill Morneau to make policies that affect insurance plans just because there are multiple companies that benefit from it and not just his. And so we will put in place a stricter test that will ban politicians, particularly ministers, from any involvement in decisions that would benefit their interests more than the public interest. They would also have to declare these interests publicly and widely so that everyone knows. Third, we'll increase the fines for ethics violations to $10,000.
Hi, Marco Vigliati, iPolitics. Once again, we're seeing an announcement, an ethics announcement focused on, Mark Carney overtly. But one thing we really haven't heard so far during this campaign is your plan to deal with the threat the threat foreign interference poses to our institutions and our election integrity. Obviously, a major focus of the previous Parliament. We've even seen during this campaign questions raised about certain candidates' close ties to foreign governments. But we really haven't heard too much on your end what you would do differently other than scolding the Liberals for not putting in place the foreign agent registry fast enough. So I'm just wondering, let's maybe just focus on nomination races, for example, a known soft spot for this activity. Would you commit to bringing those races under the umbrella of the Canada Elections Act? And if you won't commit to doing that, can you give Canadians any assurances that you would take foreign interference serious enough, even if that means reducing the autonomy political parties like the one you lead have over things like nomination races?
We will. I can assure you that we will take foreign interference seriously. After the lost Liberal decade, Canada has become a playground to foreign interference. And the Liberals have benefited from interference by Beijing in 2 consecutive elections. Beijing has now interfered in both the Liberal leadership race to help Mark Carney and again in the general election to help Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney learned of a Liberal candidate on his roster that was telling people to send his Conservative opponent back over to China on a bounty where he would have been imprisoned or killed, and Mr. Carney refused to get rid of that candidate. It was actually the candidate that finally left after we found out that the RCMP was involved. I'm very worried about the foreign interference that could result from the fact that Mr. Carney's company, which he still invests in, owes $250 million to the Chinese government. So one of the things we're going to do to stop foreign interference is require politicians divest their interests, sell them, not just put them in a fake blind trust, so they no longer have their financial strings attached to a hostile foreign government. And yes, I have complained that they have not set up the foreign interference registry. You will recall that our party put partisanship aside and we rushed through the foreign interference law. I sent out my brilliant foreign affairs critic, Michael Chong. He walked in front of all of you. He announced we would fast-track the passage. And the reason was because we wanted that foreign agent registry in place by the time the election happened. The Liberals said they would do that, and here we are. And now we don't know who are the paid actors operating on behalf of foreign governments. So we need a new Conservative government that will end the foreign interference, stand up for the integrity of our democracy, and protect our people from foreign dangers.
Golden Press, CTV.
Yes, sir.
In 2 weeks, whoever forms government is going to face critical American trade negotiations. Who would you lead? Who would you have lead your team in those negotiations?
Well, we'll be announcing our foreign minister and our cabinet after the election. But I've never seen a politician announce his cabinet before he gets elected. So that would be pretty presumptuous to start naming a cabinet before the election is over. We have a strong team of people. You look at our shadow cabinet, we have a phenomenal group that have shown tremendous competence and readiness. And look, the reality is that Mark Carney is running on a false promise. He claimed that he'd made progress with Donald Trump in his phone call, and 2 days, 3 days later, we got hit with more tariffs. And then when the rest of the world got a pause on tariffs, Mr. Carney did not secure that. Now, I'm not blaming him for that. The blame rests with Donald Trump for wrong-headed tariffs. What I'm taking issue with is making false promises. We need to focus on what we can control, which is to say reverse the disastrous economic policies that Mark Carney advised Justin Trudeau to put in place over the lost Liberal decade. Policies that drove investment out, wages down, costs up, and weakened our country. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a new Conservative government that will bring real change. Change so you can afford food, homes, change so that your paycheck goes up faster than your cost of living, change so you have safe streets. Thank you.